Okay, legends, we are back here. Scoop is here, round 26, and potentially one or two trades remaining. And I suppose we really just need to prioritize what we need to bring in. So for myself, I'm going to be needing a center for next week. So that's where I'm going to be looking for my last trade. So, suit that for yourself as to how that's going to look. And we'll go through Scoop's team as well to kick things off. So my team's in a bit of curry there, but Scoop's 142 points behind me, and I think he's a half a chance of catching up with a couple less players out than myself. So yeah, he's sitting there with what, 4 players out, right, coming into this week, and still a few trades remaining, right?
Yeah, I don't have too many. I had 5 out originally, I think. Yeah, something like that. But I've got a couple trades up my sleeve that I can definitely use to my advantage this week. I have the Souths trio of Munro, Murray, and Latrell, but Latrell's going to be gone for the year, so he has to go out. And then I've got to decide what to do with guys like Garrick. Do I hold him for the last week and hope, or do I just bite the bullet now and move him on?
So a little bit interesting news on that anyway. One of the guys commented on YouTube there, and he was saying that they think Garrick's only named there because out of their top 30, they have 10 injuries, and then a couple of other guys that they couldn't really select, like because it's the extended squad up to 22. They've got, like, Garrick's one of those 10 injuries, so they're just naming him on there
Did they
because
also name him before they got scans back in case?
no,
That might
he
be it.
it was earlier that day, so it sounds like he's
Okay.
obviously like half a chance of playing, like half, um, but it more just like the other guys are definitely not playing, and he's like the smallest chance, so they've got him on there. But yeah, NRL Physio reckons the minimum's like 3 weeks for these things, and they have nothing to play for either. So I just think
Hmm.
he's gone, unfortunately. So in your situation, I'd be trading him and Garrick, right? If you've got 3 trades, trying to load up this week, probably.
Yeah, the only thing that stops me from selling him is that Penasini plays first game. I can loop him, and then if he goes really well for some reason, I can hold off on selling Garrick.
Okay.
Then if someone more expensive is out next week, like Cleary for some reason, then I'll trade the more expensive dude to get the most expensive. But
Yeah.
like, I can sit and think about what I want to do, which is a bit of a rare luxury at this point in the
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, that's right. This last week especially has been the one to for those that have held trades, and up until this point, it wasn't really helping too much, was it? A few people have been kind of holding off, and yeah, this is when it's going to work out these last 2 rounds. So good stuff, mate. Sitting at the 1,000 last week, the Greg Marzoo savior after a couple of as you said, poor scores with Eels guys, especially. It's a little bit unfortunate, but and then Brandon Smith in the 7. He's just way too hard to play each week, isn't he? He's like a looper or nothing, isn't he?
Yeah, you've got to loop him or not. And then Cameron Munster just not getting any ball when Hughes dominated that side of the Dragons. I could not believe Munster got 25 versus Dragons, but there you go. Hopefully he fires up for these last couple of games.
Yeah, and then Graham getting less than we probably thought as well. So yeah, it kind of didn't go too poorly for you, and you should be making ranks the next couple of weeks. So yeah, my space, my time at the top, I don't think it's going to last too long on that one. So in this one, guys, just going to go through each position and decide sort of the best players scoring wise, because your last trade or two, the price doesn't matter. So if you have that certain amount available, then go for that guy. There could be a guy we think matchup wise is going to score better over the last few rounds as well. So in the hooking position, Harry Grant or bust at anywhere near the top pricing. Players that could do okay would obviously be someone like a Blake Brayley or an Appy at this point are probably the two. Chris Randall could also be okay, and then from there, probably Harrison Graham would be the only guy down below, right? That's a decent shout at the cheap price. Did you have anyone else in mind?
Lachlan Croker's come back to the pack a bit, but I mean, if you're going to buy somebody for 700k, you can probably find more points. But position wise, yeah, I mean, Damien Cook's on the buy. Robson's not great. Marshall King and Boyd are gone for the year. Like, there's such a gap between Harry Grant and the rest for this round, especially. It's huge.
Yeah, and probably the main reason we're talking about hookers in this one would be if he was to get rested next week, and you just wanted to make sure you had that cover, then that could be a way to think about it. But otherwise, I think we can go to any other position and get something better, unless you don't have Harry Grant. Get him in, obviously, there. So in the mid position, who are some guys you think are going to be the top? And really, we want to be making this decision based on who we think is going to definitely play 2 games. So with the Broncos just having their bye, guys like Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan, would you have them as high priority targets, or do you think if they were to just get second and they can't move from second, that they would rest these guys? I don't know. It'd be probably weird to have 2 restings in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it really depends on where the Broncos want to finish on the ladder. And at the moment, there could be a significant difference between finishing first and finishing second. I hate to say it for the Warriors, but they have come back a little bit in the last few weeks. And depending on how form goes, you definitely might want to play one of Warriors instead of Storm, for example. So I think the minor premiership in first, best, second still is quite important. But yeah, I mean, if they're up by heaps in the last game, which probably they won't be considering it is Storm, like they might keep them off, but I mean, that often happens to forwards anyway. So as it stands, I think Carrigan and Haas are in for some big minutes against some teams that are pretty keen to get some points and some wins like the Raiders and the Storm.
Yeah, it's looking probably more and more likely that Yo might rest that last one, but I still think it's probably worth the risk to grab him as well. But I'd personally go Payne Haas, I think, first, and then Isaiah. Probably Carrigan third up, and or Tino. Tino might be the third best option as well. Thoughts there?
Who's he got in the last 2 weeks? He's very good. He basically came back off that 3 week suspension, fresh, ready and raring to go, and punched out an 80 or something like that.
Yeah, 79.
79. So I think that he can really do some damage. Potentially in that last week against the Bulldogs, he could barge over for a try and get a lot of tackle breaks. And I mean, just in general, they're missing a lot of players. They're going to need a leader on the field, and he's probably going to be one that is going to stand up.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think he could do well. I go, Payne Haas just over him. You know that Tino's going to play these last 2 games. That's probably the big thing there. Joe Tarpany, any thoughts on him? Do you think he can really push out a couple of good ones the last 2? He's a scary one to own, that's for sure.
As a Tarpany owner for the first half of the year, it wasn't a fun ride, but he has turned up a little bit in the back end of the season. His minutes still aren't super consistent. Like, he had a couple of 60 minutes, then a 50s, and then a 48 minutes the other week. But his scoring is generally pretty good these days. And so I think you can bank on him as a little bit cheaper option than those ones and still get a 55.
Yeah, definitely there. And then we go to mid-range, I suppose. There's a couple of interesting ones. Like Corey Waddell on the edge, he seems to score fairly well there. He works really hard. So he's at about that 45 to 50 odd average. You've got Ruben Cotter at that cheap price at 473. I think it's do or die for the Cows this week. So I suppose thinking about head-to-head finals as well. I think Cotter, if you need someone, he's at 473. And I'd expect at least the 55 to 65 minutes. Would you think the same with their season on the line?
Yeah, potentially. I think that it's them, the Bunnies, and the Roosters are the only 3 that can fight for that top 8 spot. So they need to put their foot down and win these last 2. So especially even in that last week against the Panthers, he could have a monster game there and just try his heart out. This week still could be pretty good. But yeah, especially in that last week, he could go for a big one with like 70 minutes just to make sure that there's maximum hope of them making the finals.
Yeah, completely agree with that. He's definitely someone on the radar. And the main reason you'd be looking at mids right now is Cam Murray for this week, and then Hopgood, I suppose, in that last week if you don't have the middle cover, is where we're thinking here on the mid section. So you go to the edge, and really, if you're looking at that list there, it's David Fafita up top, still clearly, like we've been speaking about for a while. Any other sort of 2-week plays that you'd pick out of the edge?
None that really stand out at the moment. I mean, there's always the guys who can go big and have a decent ceiling, like Olakau'atu, who can have the odd big game, but it really depends on matchups. Nat Butcher as well has got a big game in him and is pretty consistent this year.
Yeah.
If you're going to go for somebody who's a little bit cheaper that you could potentially bank on a good score this week, I really don't mind Eliesa Katoa against the Gold Coast. He could go through for some points. First half of the year, I think he scored 1 try in like 15 games.
Yeah.
Back half of the year, he scored a try every second game, sort of a thing, and punched out some really good numbers. So if he can get over the stripe this week again, he could bust you out of 55, 60. We saw what he did last week with 82 with a double.
Yeah, definitely. He's under 600k, so that's cool as well. Corey Waddell at the 500, like I mentioned. He's got the dual You've got Lemuelu, who we'll speak about obviously in the centres as well, but that helps with the duel for him being back. 486k. Should be able to get a 40 plus. So there's definitely some options. Dan Russell's still there. Obviously a little bit more risky now. Wade Graham. So yeah, we're getting into some average scoring there. Cleese Haas is obviously a sneaky one, and then Wong in the cheap range. So if you were just looking to trade someone like, I've got Jesse Colquhoun or Valence Tafadi, those guys that aren't going to play, if you can straight swap them for a guy that you can get 2 weeks out of them, awesome. That's obviously if you're not needing a specific position. I think there, Kurt Capewell's been really good sneakily as well, but he's got up to 622 after his amazing bunch of weeks. So yeah, up top it's Fafita. Isaiah Papali'i, I think he's actually turned the corner. It looks defensively he's actually having a real crack. So him, Frizzell up top there would probably be really it, I suppose. Britton Nickera's gone down a little bit as well. So yeah, that's the edge position at this point. We move to the halves, and I think you'd say most of us are pretty set in our half position, right? But at this point, it's Hines, Cleary. I wouldn't be having Johnson as the third best scorer. I think DCE is going to be right up there this week as well. I suppose while we're on that question, who would you be looking at captaining this week? Would you stick with Cleary? Would you go Hines, or potentially like a DCE or a Payne Haas or something like that?
I think it always depends on whether you're head-to-head and matchup based, or whether you're trying to boost ranks by going against the grain. But look, with the Eels as the way they are at the moment, it's really tough to go against Cleary. It is Thursday night, but we've shown that it's not necessarily a bad thing apart from the first 2 rounds. Yeah. Look, I think it's really tough to take it off Cleary, particularly when the Sharks are playing the Knights, who are in a bit of form. Joey Manu versus the Tigers could be a real sneaky one, but I mean, you've got to have a lot of courage to go there.
Yeah, I think he should score really well. Roosters in much better form too, so that's helpful. But when you look at Hines, and yes, playing up against a tougher outfit in the Knights, but he did 90 very, very simply. And the Panthers have been a little bit off the last few weeks, and Eels aren't the same team right now. They're in free fall. Sorry, mate. In 11th, you're about as bad as my team, the Cows. But at least in your scenario, you've got a bit of excuse with your best player out. So there's that there. I think Cleary will play well this week, and yeah, again, if you want to go against the grain, sure. But I think Hines is just easy enough against the grain, and Manu has to do a lot to get to sort of 70 plus, doesn't he? Where Hines can get there a lot easier, and it's a lot easier viewing, isn't it? So halves, that's probably enough on that front. Any cheaper halves you might look at? Obviously Sam Walker's back, but I wouldn't be touching him personally. Weaver, I suppose, is still there.
I don't think there's too many that interest me, to be honest. Like, I guess Campbell being out for the year is good for Weaver if you're really looking for somebody basement cheap. But as a scorer in your 17, I'm not super interested in many halves at the moment, other than Weaver or somebody really, really cheap like that can push out a half decent score.
Yeah. So I've obviously got Garrick, and if you have about that, I've got 71 in the bank, and that allows me to actually get Munster if I just want to go for like a top scorer. If you didn't have him, is he still someone you think could do really well over these last 2 weeks if you had that extra cash?
Look, as an owner, I might be biased and all doom and gloom, but like we've been hoping we'd get post-Origin Munster absolutely firing up, and it hasn't really quite happened yet. Like, we've got a couple of 60s, but both of those have had tries in them. He did say that he had a rib injury post-Origin, and it had been, I guess, affecting him a little bit. Okay. But I don't know how much that factors into how he's scoring. Hughes has stepped up the last couple of weeks and taken points away from him. So while he is a good one, and I mean, against the Gold Coast, anything can happen, and he could finally go for that big one. But I mean, when does he do it? He didn't do it against Para, really. Didn't do it against the Dragons last week at all. So it's a bit of a tough call to say yes, he'll be great with any certainty.
Yep. Agreed. Centres. We have Lomax coming back. Would you show any caution towards him with the injuries coming off?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, is he the second most expensive centre now? Yeah, 721k. That's massive. You might as well just go Gagai.
Yeah.
Especially because Gagai has Dragons in the last week. So I would probably go down if you're really looking for another centre, and obviously you probably already have Manu. I'd be looking more towards a Farnworth or Look, even a Stephen Crichton with a couple of really interesting matchups
He's going to get
wouldn't be
rested for
too bad.
sure, I think. That's my only
You
worry.
reckon?
There was talk of him
Yeah.
getting rested last week, him and Liam Martin, and they haven't. So I think last week for sure
Mm.
for Stephen. But that could be all of them, to be fair. Could be Edwards and those guys that kind of didn't really, they kept backing up. And Edwards hasn't had a break with Origin, like over the Origin period. So
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, I think he can
Connor
definitely.
Tracy's available at centre as well, I think, and he's not doing too bad.
Yeah, Tracy's definitely one to look at, isn't he? So 489, very very cheap on that front, and got a 50 last week, didn't he? 50, 51. So 45 and 51 those last two, and that was just one try assist last week. So yeah, he's at that Lem early range. So if you do have Lem already, then Tracy could probably just as good and a little bit less owned, which is nice for him. But yeah, Gagai up top, guys, and Manu would probably have Manu just ahead of him at this point. But if you can get Gags in, he's just absolutely dominating at the moment. Still think Lomax will come back and do well. I'm likely going to have to select Farnworth. Just because I can't get up to those top guys just. And you look at his scores, they're actually wild. I think he's gone lowest score of like 34, 35, and the highest score is like 60 odd. So as consistent as it can be for Herbie. A little bit different to his counterpart in Katoni Staggs, and it's actually crazy that they're almost at the same price, 647, and then Staggs is 634. For how Farnworth's averaged 47.5 and Staggs averaging 38, and they're pretty much the same price. So it's crazy how that 5-round average works, doesn't it?
It's been a wild old season for Staggs. At the beginning of the season, a few people jumped on thinking he might go good back from a couple of injuries, and he, apart from a couple of games, he had an absolutely shocking start. I think he dropped below 400k,
Yeah.
and then he's absolutely shot up the last few weeks with some really big ceiling scores. So I mean, I don't know whether that's form and that's going to continue, or you go with the higher average. I mean, it's a boom or bust play, Staggs, but at 634k, it sort of turns me off a little bit knowing that he can drop a 20 or an even teen score.
Yeah, you'd have Ramian over Staggs, and I think Farnworth's your safe one. And then it's Timoko and Ramian I'd have in a similar boat, but I think Raiders have got a tough couple of matchups as well. They have who do they have? They have who's their hard one this week?
They got Broncos.
That's right.
And someone.
Yeah, so there's the Broncos, the one I was thinking of. So yeah, that's that on that front. And then you got Suoli'i, who has that obviously center and wing and fullback duel, which could help you next week as well. And he's been scoring really well. So yeah, centers. There's a lot of options actually, which is strange for this time of year and centers in general, right? And then the wing fullback side of things, for those that obviously Drinkwater and Ponga are up top. Most of us have them already. And then it's going to be probably Greg Marzou, isn't it? Would be the next option, or like a Walshy, I'd say. To'o could definitely have a couple of good weeks. They're probably the three, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're at the top. I mean, Marzu's been just about topping the wing fullback averages most of the year, and we finally saw him go big last week, much to my delight.
Yes, 53.6.
I think he's got Dragons in the last week. They're not as weak down to left wingers compared to right wingers, but still, he could have a good day there as well.
Yeah. Would you pick Suoli'i over Kiraz right now?
Yes, I think I probably would. Like, the Roosters are coming home strong, and they are a real chance to make the 8. They're one of 3 teams fighting for it, and I think that they'll need to do everything they can to make it in. So I don't mind him as an option compared to a bottom 8 wing fullback. That season's pretty much over.
Yeah. And there's a few other options down there. You got Dylan Edwards, who has that resting risk, but a much better score from him last week. Obviously, Geordie Rapana, we got Connor Tracy as we spoke about. So yeah, boom or bust with Geordie, 16 into an 84, which is incredible. Tracy will be your consistent guy. So I suppose based it off what you need, right? And as you said, with the head-to-head final, captaincy could be where you make that change. And what you need to be looking at with that, guys, is if you see you're different, your unique players to each other, do you think that you're going to be able to beat them? And if you think it's a no based on their averages, and it's like, okay, well, guys like Geordie Rapana, I suppose Edwards has the boom or bust at the moment too, those type of players there, maybe using a last trade on one of them, if you think you're going to lose, just to try and potentially propel you over the top. Kiraz is probably going to be like a 40 to 50 kind of guy most weeks, right? He's gone 38 in a row, so showing his consistency. So probably based off that. And if you're on the other side of it and you're in the lead, you think you're in the lead, and maybe just going for that consistent guy is going to be the best way to go about it as well. there's actually a fair few options, right? The issue is we don't have a lot of we don't have many trades. One for myself, a few for you. Any other advice, I say, for the your last trade or two there, Scoop?
Yeah, something I've been heavily weighing up the last couple of days is thinking about maximizing the team value that's playing. So there's a lot of guys that we're looking at selling at the moment, like Latrell and Garrick, and around that price that is sort of 700K. That if you're missing them in round 27, that's going to suck quite a lot. But if you end up selling cheaper guys just so that you might have Garrick back and that you have sort of a substandard scorer, you might have, instead of 2.5 million not playing next week, you might have 3 million not playing. And that's sort of something that could actually really hurt you if you don't actually have enough star power on the field. So that's why I'm actually considering holding someone like Garrick if Penasini can score well enough, and then potentially sell someone if they're rested. Like if Cleary's rested next week,
Yeah.
I want to be able to buy anybody who I want instead of like a sub 700 guy.
Yeah,
You know?
get
If I
top
can
scorer
get a
available.
decent score out of Penasini, that is something I'm strongly considering.
Yeah, and that's a great idea, and that's something you can do if you're going to get a solid 17. And pretty similar thoughts to over the Origin period, right? Like round 13, if you had 13 average players, or you have 11 to 12 guns, and obviously that means you have that gun in that round, and obviously next week in round 27 as well. So yeah, great thoughts to finish things out, guys, and I appreciate you guys for checking in. A little bit of a shorter one today. It's all we really needed, which was good. And yeah, 2 rounds to go to see if Scoop can beat me, hey, and get close to the top of that private group. It's been a very fun season. Thanks to everyone for being here.